Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny is the fifth and final film in the classic action franchise. Here we find our hero living in the late 1960s and facing the final days of his tenure as a college professor. But the classic hero we all know and love is now a shell of a man. He is living moment to moment without much purpose. That is, until a spunky young girl with personal ties to his past comes into his life to get help in her sorry, how did that get in there? Anyway, he is brought into this adventure by Helena Shaw, a jack-of-all-trades played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Together they embark on a quest to find the titular Dial of Destiny before it falls into the hands of a former Nazi-turned-NASA scientist played by Mads Mikkelsen. Look, I'd be beating a dead horse with a stick, or a whip in this case, by describing how perfect the original trilogy is. Those movies have solidified themselves as action-adventure masterpieces that have influenced so much of the cinematic landscape today. They're perfect examples of efficient filmmaking that only seem to get better with age. Well, for the most part. And we all know Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was a big step down from what had come before. I don't outright hate it like a lot of people do, but it definitely missed the mark with regards to recapturing that same magic. Here, director James Mangold takes the helm from Steven Spielberg to close out this globe-trotting franchise. Those are pretty big shoes to fill, but Mangold is no chump. For the most part, he has proven himself to be a competent storyteller across a variety of genres. Logan was one of the best comic book films to come out recently, Ford v Ferrari was a compelling sports drama that was better than it had any right to be, and Walk the Line is just one of the best movies ever made, period. From westerns to dramas, James Mangold has shown he can deliver the goods. But is all of that enough to take over one of the best franchises of all time from one of the greatest directors of all time? Let me just start off by saying this thing is incredibly too long. It follows the trend of other recent blockbusters by making its runtime well over 2.5 hours, which is just unnecessary. Each of the older films barely clocked in over 2 hours without any elements feeling rushed in the process. That being said, I'm going to try my best to not constantly compare this one to the OG trilogy. They stand on their own, and this one seeks to forge something new. At least, at some points it does. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny falls into the trap of trying to be something original while constantly playing homage to the better stories that came before it, and it does this across a bloated runtime and a rather lackluster set of action set pieces throughout. As some of you might know, the film opens with an extended prologue that takes us back to the days of World War II, and through the modern-day miracles of CGI, we are treated to a young version of Indiana Jones. Now, I'm not gonna lie, when they first revealed the de-aged Indy, I was actually pretty impressed. I've come to hate the way this effect has been implemented in Hollywood today, but I was ready to eat crow and admit that it didn't look half bad. Then, 5 seconds later, it started to talk, and I immediately took it back. It's still modern-day Harrison Ford talking through this digital meat muppet, so you're essentially hearing an 80-year-old man through this computer-generated monstrosity. And the lips don't even match the words he's saying. It's hard to enjoy a long action sequence when I can't even buy that the hero is actually going through it. And I'm gonna be honest, with the awful CGI face and the image of a train going through a dark mountain area, I felt like I was watching Polar Express. And that leads right into my next problem. The action is dull. This is an utterly lifeless adventure that feels like it's covering up the fact that its hero is 80 years old by forcing us to watch several dark and rainy sequences. There were points when I was barely able to see what was going on. And that was the point, I guess. Even the daylight chases lack that kinetic energy the originals maintained throughout. If you somehow mess up doing the action sequences for an Indiana Jones movie, then yeah, you really messed up. This feeling of lifelessness plagues the entire movie, by the way, and not just the fighting. I found myself incredibly bored throughout most of the runtime, and just praying that someone would use the Dial of Destiny to speed up the pacing. Harrison Ford is trying his best with the material given. He clearly loves both the franchise and this character to death, and it shows. The few times I laughed or felt any emotion in this movie were the way he delivered certain lines. Not even the lines as written, just the way he delivered them. Phoebe Waller-Bridge is a mixed bag as Helena Shaw. She certainly got the spunk of a classic Indiana Jones sidekick, but the writing for her character seems to change depending on the scene she's in. I can tell the filmmakers were trying to model her character off of the edgier version of Indy seen in the beginning of Temple of Doom, but honestly, she just comes off more like a female version of Mac from Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Mads Mikkelsen is physically incapable of turning in a bad performance. He chews the scenery as the evil Dr. Schmidt, and once his plan is fully revealed in the third act, it sets up a rather interesting twist to what I was expecting. Then the movie chooses to go in a particular direction, one that was not revealed in any trailers or promotional material. I'm not going to say what it is, but it's a story choice that was rather baffling and quite egregious. Personally, I found it to be a bigger jump the shark sequence than anything found in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Jeez, never thought I'd say that. The whole Dial of Destiny MacGuffin itself just feels like wasted potential in the end. The story uses it to pose some deep questions for Indy which never really get resolved. There's one scene where we see the character dealing with the possible ramifications that such a device would have on his own past, but again, it's Ford that sells that moment, as the script doesn't have anywhere for that subplot to go. Now, do I think this movie is worse than Crystal Skull overall? Well, I'll put it like this. The three main issues people had with that film were its poor use of CGI, an annoying side character, and a hero that feels way past his prime. This movie has worse CGI, an even more annoying side character, and a hero that's even older. So, you do the math. I've been trying to figure out where it went wrong for director James Mangold here, and ultimately I feel like it comes down to an issue of confidence. He was trying his best to replicate the magic of a Spielberg movie, but in effect it comes off as a replication of what's come before, which ends up falling flat on its face. There's a moment in the film where Indiana is shown a fake artifact. He describes it as a fake, a reproduction, which is exactly how I felt about this movie. It commits the greatest sin an Indiana Jones entry can commit. It's unmemorable, and by the time it concluded, I found the entire venture to be a completely unnecessary undertaking that added nothing to the character. For me, the true ending of this story will forever be Indy riding off into the sunset with his friends and family. Riding off to a better world, one where a faceless corporate entity lets sleeping dogs lie, and stops trying to dig up old treasures in hopes of cashing in on nostalgia. But sadly, that world is not our own. I give Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny a D.